Hey y'all, it's Livy Redden. Welcome back to Today's the Future. We're in the studio again. Second time. We've changed things up a little bit. I'm learning, and it's been so fun. Today's guest, so excited to have her on. Her name's Chelsey Goodan. She has been an academic tutor and mentor for 16 years, focusing on the empowerment of teenage girls. Over the years, she's come to intimately understand and connect with not only the inner lives of teenage girls, but also their rawest wisdom and power. And this experience led her to write and publish her new book, which is a USA Today bestseller titled Underestimated: The Wisdom and Power of Teenage Girls. It's been recommended by Oprah's Book Club and featured in Time magazine. She's also a speaker and advocate for improving parent-teen relationships, gender justice, empowerment, and authenticity. And to describe it in her own words, our society treats teenage girls as something to fix rather than to value, and that needs to change. I've written Underestimated as a course correction to help girls unleash their intrinsic wisdom. My teens tell me that no one ever asks them real questions or cares to listen to their answers. Underestimated presents teenage girls as they are, unvarnished, and let me tell you, they are glorious. Chelsey, hello. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. How are you feeling? I feel like I'm excited. I have a little bit of anxious energy. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm great. I have no doubt that you know exactly the right questions to ask me on this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a copy of her book here, severely annotated. This book, and I'll do my own very real, genuine endorsement of it right now. I mean, as someone that works with teenagers myself, and I had put this on my Instagram story as well. Not only would I love for more teenage girls to read this, but teenage boys as well. And I think it would be so helpful for more boys and men to read something like this, to really understand the teenage girl that's inside of all women. And because I think there's often a disconnect there. And as I was reading this, it also helped me reconnect with my teenage self in so many ways. And so thank you for creating something that really, you do such a great job of your exact mission of helping people feel seen and heard. It's amazing.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. That means the world to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. So I want to start. I love to ask this question specifically with authors. And I started asking it more recently because as someone that's written a book, it's such an intimate experience. And there's things you cut. There's things that you're like, it barely stayed in. So I'm curious if there's any story or chapter in the book that you read and you're like, that's my soul on paper. That's me.
Oh, wow. Such a good question. Well, so much of the book is in service to being a microphone and portal for what teenage girls want to say to the world, right? So every choice was very much based on how can I uplift their voices and what they want to say. And as you know, they were super involved in the whole process, whether it's giving quotes or, they sent me edits. They chose the chapter titles, right? Awesome. That said, your question's great because I would say, and I think it tends to surprise people, but I think that the radical honesty chapter is my soul, and maybe the power chapter is my soul. Yeah. Both of those, I would say. Yeah. Which I could get into more detail why, but to me, it's a lot about how we're going to change the world. And that's, there has been so much focus on this book on how to understand and connect with teenage girls. But my soul is actually, they're so powerful. Yeah. Let's let them change the world. Yeah. And that's the next layer to the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it's claiming power and has a lot to do with radical honesty. And I feel like you probably really had to exercise that and work through that yourself just to write this.
Right. Yeah, I had to grapple with a lot of my own healing of my inner teenage girl in order to write it. I would say the radical honesty was the easiest for me to write because thankfully I just lived and grew up in an environment where your honest truth was welcomed. It felt safe to say the truth in a way that you weren't going to be judged or criticized, which is an environment I wish for everyone. Yeah. And then that helps you connect with your authenticity, which I talk a lot about in the book, which then makes you powerful, makes you feel like you can say your voice out loud and what you care about. But there was chapters like the beauty chapter that were much harder, and I had to really reckon with what is my my main point here that I need to say, and I had to find my own healing to get there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, that brings up this question for me. Yeah, I'll go here. So kind of digging into that further, in what ways, like does any specific moment come to mind where you had to work through something that brought up your own shame or fear to actually get the chapter down on paper or figure out what direction you wanted to go?
Yeah, the sexuality chapter, of course. And that is one I'm really proud of. And I will say the feedback from the teenage girl world, they're so thankful for that chapter and just how little they get sex education narratives in general in their life. It's not okay. Like, we need to do better. And a lot of parents are so scared to talk to their kid with sex education conversations. And I always, as I say in the chapter, I say to them, well, what makes you uncomfortable about talking about it with them? Go figure that out first. Yep. Go deal with your baggage, deal with your wounds, because otherwise what you're going to do is you're going to continue the cycle. Your daughter's going to absorb those same patterns, and that's not what we want, right? So I've definitely done so much of my own healing work in that space to be able to, again, come at the conversation with genuine curiosity and figure out how we can empower girls in this space.
Yeah, I'm sure it was hard to kind of figure out with a topic like that, I don't know what the word is, like, with something that has so much shame around it, it requires such a level of radical honesty to really talk about the topic. And so it's like, I don't know, there really does have to be a real reckoning with it within yourself to like frame it in a way where people are feeling really seen and heard as they're reading it. That's an interesting topic to try and...
Yeah, and then there's a shame chapter too, right? Where I bring up slut shaming, which is, again, a huge thing all of the girls want me to talk about because they just never feel like they can do anything right. And it's too much, too little. They have no space to explore their own identity in this. Yeah,
it's interesting you say too much, too little, because I remember being a teenager and it was like... It seemed to be on the extreme where every single one of my friends either felt really ashamed that they were so inexperienced or really ashamed that they had done too much.
Exactly.
And it was just like, what are we doing? And we're all like pointing fingers at each other, like, she hasn't done this and she is doing too much of that. And it's like, what are we doing?
We're judging each other, right? Like, a huge message of the entire book is... let's not judge each other. I mean, that's what teenage girls feel. They feel judged. Yep. And it turns out everyone else in the world also feels judged. Yep. And we're all just mitigating how to not feel judged. And how do we actually instead listen to each other and meet them exactly where they're at, love them for exactly who they are without secret agendas or shoulds, right? Like the shoulds of like they should be experienced or they shouldn't be experienced. Like, oh my gosh, what if she just give her some space to explore?
Yeah, what if we weren't shutting up a storm because we were doing that? Yeah, and in the, kind of going back to what you said of like, you would really love to see more, especially teenagers, like grow up in an environment where honesty is very highly welcomed. That was something I wanted to ask you about because you provide a lot of scripts and communication frameworks in the book for parents and also really for anyone. They could really apply to anyone. Is there one that comes to mind that you could share that really sticks out, that you feel like really helps with the trust and bond between a parent and a teen or a parent and an adult child? Is there any specific framework that kind of comes to head? Because there are quite a lot of them, and I was curious if there's one that's been...
Yeah, I mean, gosh, one of the just most basics that I just constantly use is, what are your thoughts on that? Well, what are your thoughts on that? I'm always just asking a girl, what are your thoughts on that? And that respects her voice as being part of the conversation. It also tells her that I think her thoughts are smart and have value. And then it also helps her actually look internally and say, what are my thoughts on that? And check in with herself rather than worrying about what everyone thinks she should say. And so that's just basic level. And then kind of next level, I would say, is what do you need right now? How can I best support you? A lot of people come back being like, well, she always says, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, then say...
There's probably a reason.
Yeah, because we've never actually given her enough time and space to check in with herself and be like, what do I need right now? Actually learning what your needs is a process. And just because we don't know instantly doesn't mean we just give up, right? And so lots of times I'll say, okay, well then just say, okay, I trust you'll figure it out. Or like, come back to me when you have a better idea because I want to support you in what your needs are. Because I do think that we're teaching girls to put other people's needs before their own. And that carries into womanhood in a big, big way, whether it's through people pleasing and all sorts of different ways. And then the other one I would say is, what do you think the solution is? What do you think the solution is? Because that activates, again, her smart thoughts and gives her agency and choice in the situation. Right. And when a girl comes up with her own solution, that's when empowerment happens. And that's what develops that confidence everyone's searching for, right? Everyone wants girls to be confident. And it's actually broken more into pieces like that I just covered just now. What do you need? What do you think the solution is? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to point out that you said is if they say, I don't know, giving the invite of like, come back to me when you figure it out. Because I found, like when you said that, if someone were to ask me, it made me think of, I was going through a difficult time recently, and my roommate asked me, she was like, let me know how I can support you. Like, what do you need? And I was just like, I'm a chronic, I'm finer. Like, I'm fine, it's fine, I'm fine, I survive, I'm fine. And people that listen to the podcast have heard me talk about that a lot. And I didn't have an answer in that moment, even though I did need help.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, and this is not like a fault to her, like I wouldn't have even thought of this, of like, had she been like, well, come back to me when you figure it out. Because for me, like there's a lot of, and I think you talk about it in the book, for a lot of women, there is a feeling of weakness and shame in needing help.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge issue. And actually, when I have a lot of other women in my life, whether it's another author or another, podcast host, whoever, that are all actually asking me right now, like, well, do you have advice on how I can do something right now? And actually, one of my biggest pieces of advice is ask for help. And it's so uncomfortable. Yep. It feels like tearing off your skin. Trust me, I know I felt it too, right? And then this entire book journey has been this wild process of asking for help in a way that put myself out there. But this is what I learned is people do want to help you. I mean, don't you feel good when you're helping a friend? Yeah. It makes you feel good. Yeah. And so somebody might feel good by helping me. And also, they're helping serve a bigger vision, right? Like I'm trying to make the world a safer, better place for teenage girls. People want in on that. They want to help that. And if you really believe in what you're trying to do and put out there in the world, then people are going to want to help it. Mm-hmm. And it's not weak. It's not like it doesn't say something bad about you. Yeah. I wonder, trust me, I've had to unwrap this myself. I'm like, where did this messaging come from, right? And so that it's fine, right, which I talk about in the book, girls just saying it's fine, it's fine. I think it comes back to putting other people's needs before our own and projecting an image of being perfect, being likable, having everything okay. Because if you show anything that you might need help, then people might not think you're okay. They might not like you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a societal issue. It's not your actual personal issue. I think when we get in a relational place, we're happy to help each other.
Yeah, that's a good point. And especially like, it's interesting that the book is titled Underestimated because I remember expressing to my mom many times as a teenager and even now, saying, I feel so underestimated, like all the time. And she was like, what do you mean by that? Because like, people talk very highly of you. Like you've achieved really incredible things. Like, I think you're an awesome person. And I'm like, well, it's just like, I feel like I have to fight to be perceived as powerful. Totally. And it's like, it's hard to describe when it's like, a lot of people do hold you in high regard, but it's like, there's this internal struggle of like, I have to really fight to have that and keep that up.
Oh my gosh, you nailed it. I love how you just worded that. It's so important to bring attention to this. Actually, I haven't even dove into this with somebody in a conversation yet, but it's so smart. And the very last line of the book is, you have nothing to prove to me. And I say that.
That one, yeah.
Yeah, I say that to girls all the time, and it makes them emotional. And why aren't we saying that to women and girls, like that they don't have something to prove? Why do we have this feeling like we need to prove ourselves? And so to get back to that idea of powerful, right? Which you are powerful, and I want you to own that. And I think the ways that we have defined power in society have been really limiting. And as I talk about in the power chapter, we don't characterize ourselves in that space. Yeah. So we're kind of like, I know I'm powerful, but I'm not into domination, oppression, wealth, status, all these things that have been characterized as powerful. Right. Women and girls are like, pass. We don't really see that as a great goal necessarily, because it hasn't really worked out. It's created war, it's created all these bad narratives that I think that now women and girls are like, wait, if you just let me lead, I will lead with care, compassion, empathy, generosity, and that is powerful. Yeah. And we just haven't characterized it as powerful. I mean, what if we said, oh my gosh, you're so powerful because you're so empathetic? Yeah. And just started using the word differently. That would be exciting to me, so that we could create that space that maybe we feel like we belong in it more. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when I read that line in your book of, you have nothing to prove to me, I'm like, man, that would have disarmed me so good as a teenager. Even now, I was like, when I read that line, I was like, oh, yeah. And it's really interesting. Like a lot of women, myself included, have spent a lot of my time being like, I have to prove myself. Therefore, like, exactly, I'm fine. I don't need help. It's like that I talk a lot about hyper independence. It's like very aggressively, like, if I can't do it myself, then like, what's wrong with me? Which is like not how humans function.
That self-sufficiency. Yeah. I know it so well. I get it. Yeah. And it comes from this place of that underestimated, right? Or just not feeling enough as you are, right? It's that idea of you have nothing to prove. And so that not enoughness, which is to me a very human quality, women, men, everybody. And how we try to fill that hole through achievements, or all these other things. What I wish for every human is that they can feel that wholeness without some external measure defining it for them.
Yeah, yeah. And that actually brings up, I wanted to ask you about this. There was a piece that I marked in your book where I was like, I would love to hear her talk more about that. Oh yeah, when it comes to like proving yourself. So I think that also there's a lot of, because of like a feeling of being underestimated, my experience as a teenage girl, because I can only really speak from my experience and maybe like the teenage girls that I've spoken to and work with, there was also this feeling of exactly what you talk in the book about. I also can't displease people, so like the people pleasing. But I never really considered myself a people pleaser because I was like, well, I do what I want. Like I've always pretty radically done what I wanted to, like pursued the things I wanted to, said no to the things I didn't want to do. But in the keeping peace space, like keeping the peace, especially in my family, that's where I really people please. And I never defined it as people pleasing because I was just like, to survive and keep the space steady and stable around me, I need to just try and avoid displeasing people because it didn't really come from a place of insecurity. It had more to do like my childhood was very unstable. So if I can stabilize things as much as possible, I will do that even at my own detriment.
Oh, gosh, I love how you just summed that up. And I think that you're not alone at all with struggling with that. I mean, I certainly, same thing, right? I talk about, and the wicked pair is perfectionism with people-pleasing, being like a girl's attempt to stabilize their environment. Yeah. And any teenage life is going to be chaotic, and every family is going to have issues and problems. And I do find that the weight, it falls on the girl, the daughter, more than the son, in a way that she carries the family's emotional weight and burden. No one's actually explicitly saying this to her usually, but I've seen this pattern again and again of her trying to stabilize everyone within a family and make sure everything's keeping the peace or happy or good. And then, she does that, then she feels good about herself, right? Like, you're doing it so that you feel okay.
Yeah.
Because, of course, if everyone's happy around you, you'll feel better.
Yep.
But there's a self-abandonment that happens where your needs aren't met. Like girls are not given a lot of chances to just be a mess. And I would want that for you. The displeasing feelings, right? Just sitting in your frustration or your disappointment or your anger, right?
Yeah.
There's no room for women and girls to be angry, right? They can immediately put stereotypes on them.
Yeah.
But those are really normal human emotions. Yeah. And instead we squash, internalize, repress, and it totally unravels later in life, in a midlife crisis and therapy in your 40s. Like, it will come out, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I really love this idea of creating more space and room for not only girls to explore their identity, as we've talked about, but also just be messy and be imperfect.
Yep.
And maybe not please everyone all the time. And I will say, I've worked with boys extensively. They do get that opportunity. It's a huge difference I see between girls and boys. Boys are totally fine making mistakes and being a mess. We say boys will be boys, and they don't absorb mistakes into their identity the way that girls do, right? They don't think of it as now they have a character flaw or they're a failure. They're just like, oh, whatever, I made a mistake. Girls are like, oh my gosh, I will never do that again. I failed. It's so different.
Yeah, yeah. And a quote I want to read from your book, since we've been talking about sort of like people pleasing and trying to control the narrative of the people around us. I wanted to read this because this really hit home for me, and I would love for listeners to hear this. You said, I have a complete and utter aversion to the feeling of being displeasing. The thought of someone not liking me hurts. It hurts to feel it. So I'd rather put on a dazzling performance of positivity in order to distract. And then later in that page you say, I often think that the trapped scream inside of teenage girls comes from not only a desperate need to be imperfect, aka human, but also a fierce need and desire to be displeasing. That's right. We need to be displeasing sometimes. We need space to be broken, annoyed, angry, frustrated, moody, and unlikable. And I read that and I was like, yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So good.
Yay.
And it's especially like the freedom to be angry and annoying, especially those two things, like annoying, it's difficult.
Oh, I know. I have a ton of fear of being annoying. And I give voice to it. I'll be like, okay, we all know that I'm scared of being annoying. Am I being annoying? Like, I'll check in with people because I still have that fear. But I have consciousness around it, right? I am aware of it now and trying to work through it and figure out where it comes from, because a lot of these wounds happen in our teenage years and they carry into adulthood. And the more I can source back, like, where did that narrative? I actually thought about it. I haven't talked about this, but I thought about it the other day that I think my older brother might have called me annoying a lot through my teenage years. That's not in the book. But because this was a recent revelation where I was trying to source, where does this come from? And I think he just naturally set up shop inside my heart that I didn't want to annoy my brother. And so it could be something as simple as that. But I think that you're right, that women wanting to be angry or annoying, like, there's no space for it. We are so judged immediately for it. So what if we had room? It could be space with friends. Family, I think, is hard. Sometimes people feel that way with a sibling, that they have that safe space. But, where you actually say it to your friend, like, can I just be, like, really angry and annoying, or annoyed right now? And can you just hold that space for me? And then they're usually like, okay, yeah, go, do it,
Yeah.
And so we can be more intentional about creating that space.
Yeah. And with your brother, too, that's interesting, because I think there's also that, me as, like, the younger sister, I did want my sister to think I was cool. She was, like, older than me, and she was cool. And she was pretty, and boys liked her, and I was like, I want her to think I'm cool.
Right.
Don't hold that against me. I don't know if I've ever said that to you, but there you go.
I know, I don't think I've said this about my brother.
And, yeah, kind of switching gears, I want to, on the topic of that, too, something I feel like I haven't covered well on my podcast is the topic of social anxiety. And I was actually, if you're the woman on Goodreads that left this review on my book, thank you so much. She said, I loved this book. However, there was quite a bit of advice that came from an extrovert's perspective, or like someone that's also very like socially confident. And I was like, that's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. And so I wanted to know if you had any thoughts as you've worked with specifically teenage girls on, it's just such a big thing, social anxiety, being anxious to go into a social setting, be in a social setting. You then leave the social setting and you're like, everyone hated that. The things I had to say, they didn't like that. Or like, was I too much? So yeah, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on social anxiety, why we feel that so deeply, and how we can kind of reframe to kind of reckon with that.
Yeah. No, it's important. And I will say every chapter of the book is kind of, it provides different lessons into this conversation. And it's stuff we've touched on, which of course, social anxiety is very common. I would never want anyone to feel alone in feeling it. And it connects back to what can you do to not care what people think, right? How can you do that? And it's so easier said than done, right? And so the ways into that are how we've already talked about, actually celebrating and connecting with your weirdness, which is your authenticity. Like, what do you actually love to do? What lights you up? What makes you feel like you're most yourself in this world? And do more of that. Do whatever you can to do more of that, because that builds those layers of protection or strength against those environments, because you're just like, well, I like who I am, right? It's about also doing that check-in that we've talked about, which are, what are my needs? Because again, when you go into a social environment, there's a people pleasing there. It's kind of like, how can people like me? How can I make sure everyone's happy here? And actually, your needs might be that you only want to be at that party, that event for 30 minutes. And because you are an introvert, and that's all you can do, and that's all you have to give, and you can give 100% into that 30 minutes or not. Like, what are your needs in social environments? Do you need to only have really heartfelt one-on-one conversations, or would you rather kind of see a lot of different people and talk to them briefly? Like, what do you actually want out of this situation? And lean into that for yourself. And then recognizing that no one's doing it perfectly. This whole idea, I'm very intense about perfection does not exist. And I say that constantly to girls, and it really takes a long time for that to sink in, I think, for everybody. I think we all still think we could do it perfectly. We can do that social event perfectly or not. And so I also like to bring in honesty. I mean, again, every element of it works, where I like to call things out when I'm in a social environment. Sometimes I'm so high energy, and I'll get social anxiety where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, start thinking, is this girl for real? She's too much, right? Or high energy. So I'll just call it out and be like, hey, so just so you know, I know I'm high energy. Like, it's really who I am. And then they kind of laugh, and it gets real. So, I've developed my own techniques to just be like, I'm not going to care what you think. I'm going to own my authenticity. I'm going to do what I need to do that makes me happy. And it's a practice. I'm not saying these are quick tricks, right? But it's a worthy practice to lean into, because if you're having social anxiety, that's going to translate into all different environments in your life, whether it's an interview for a job or whatever it might be. So the more that you can get in tune with your needs, your authentic self, your voice, the better. Your honesty.
Yeah. I really like the idea of like, what do I want out of this social interaction or like this social event? Because it also kind of brings up the question for me, because I found especially actually after COVID that I became much more socially anxious. I was just like alone all the time, which was awesome in a lot of ways. But it made me, it created a little bit of social anxiety that I've worked through since then. But it's really interesting because previously in my life, I wasn't socially anxious. I didn't really leave interactions being like, did they enjoy my presence, until more recent years. And it's been like an interesting kind of thing to work through. But I really like the idea of not only asking like, what do I want out of this interaction, but also, did I have fun?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that can alleviate did they have fun with me? But like, did I have fun? And like the bottom line is like, that's what matters. Did I have fun? Yeah, I did. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
no, exactly. And make your choices. You have choices. That's another empowerment tool, is understanding you have choices. And so I've also learned, I was expending my energy on people that weren't that fun to me, actually, that were really, I was giving, and they were taking. And I've gotten way more in tune with like, wait, am I going to have fun if I go to that? Like, is that actually a person I really want to spend my time on? I have a choice on how I use my time. And when I'm with this person, I feel so myself. I feel exactly who I want to be. So I'm going to consciously choose that time with that person. And yeah, you can also make it what you want too. We have more power than we think in these environments. I'm constantly showing up and trying to be like, well, I don't think that activity is the most fun. Like, let's actually do this instead.
You can voice your opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. It's funny because that made me think of, there was a quote from Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, that I had put on my social media, and it like blew up. I don't know, like millions of views. And I was reading a story that she shares about walking into a room with her teenage daughter. Her daughter had friends over, boys and girls, and the boys were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and the girls were like sitting on the floor in a circle. And she asked the group of everybody there, "Do you guys want anything to eat?" And without hesitation, all the boys on the couch were just like, "Yeah, yes, I'm hungry," and that was it. Didn't even really, it didn't faze them. It was just like, am I hungry? Yes.
Right, yeah.
And then she looks over at the girls, and they all scan each other's faces. And then they all look at one girl who's like the leader. And she turns and she goes, "We're fine."
Oh my God.
And I went, oh, yeah, that's going to be the case. And at the end of that story, she says the quote, "This is why we live hungry." And I was just like, oh, that's so real.
Oh,
where
wow.
It's just like the not speaking up, even in like an environment where what you're talking about of like, I'd actually rather do this. Like, or like, can we find a middle ground of the activity we're going to be doing?
Yeah.
Like, there's such just like I have to scan the room first.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
I mean, it permeates every part of our lives. It's just picking a restaurant that we want to go to with a group or with one friend. It's like, well, what do you want? What do you want? I have now been like, what kind of restaurant do I actually like? Like, and
yes.
And also, I like when it's in my neighborhood. And so I'll tend to be like, well, actually, I'm going to throw out a restaurant that I don't have to travel to, that's in my neighborhood, that I've learned I really love a patio. I really love fish. Like, I've been figuring out what I actually like.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, which I swear happens on a weekly basis, you're setting up dinner plans with a friend, and I say what I want, and then I'm always like, what does that work for you? Do you want that? And I'm happy to hear their needs also. But it's funny how often I now get more of what I want. That makes me happy because, first of all, I sat with it and like determined. I checked in with myself and was like, what do you actually like? And then I say it out loud.
Yeah. It's like it's the pause. It's like you need to, because the natural reaction might not always be to do
it's like,
that.
oh, whatever,
it's
I'm
that
fine
pause
with anything.
where it's
Cool.
like, wait, what do I actually want right now?
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's like that mechanism was broken for girls and women, because I feel like everyone interceded so fast. We were like, oh, well, just people want to protect and teach girls all the time, and I find that they enter into that exact moment, that pause moment, and kind of choose for her, right? It's turning to that leader girl and letting her choose. And there's just not enough pause space for the girl to choose for herself.
Yeah. And as we kind of wrap up here, let me see if there was any other specific... Oh, okay. I wanted to end with this. So, you have... Which chapter is this? Let me see. In your identity chapter of the book, you talked about teenage girls and people in general downplaying their talents. And I'll read this little quote as well. You said, "In downplaying their talents, I've had a lot of girls tell me that they're really good at English, so it's okay that they're not good at math. Girls often feel like they can be really good at only one thing. This is when I say I'm really good at English, I'm really good at math, I'm also really good at history, and you kind of create a list there. And then at the end you said, I continue until it's really uncomfortable. A part of me still feels very uncomfortable detailing those things, but I'm trying to model the radical choice of liking myself and owning my talents. That said, I'm still sitting here wondering if I should erase all of that because it feels so uncomfortable. And I thought, like, maybe this is weird, but I want to do it. I thought it would be cool if we closed our eyes and went back and forth and said the things we feel we're really good at. Would you be open to that?
Oh my goodness, I love this. And it's so uncomfortable and I love it.
It's so uncomfortable because I was like, after I read that, I was in my room like trying to say it out loud and I was like, I don't like this. And so I don't know, I thought it would be a cool thing to kind of, like, we don't see women doing that very often of being like, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. I'm actually really proud of this.
I go on and say in the book where I feel like I'm breaking some colossal rule, societal rule, that women are allowed to be good at one thing and own that and only talk about that. And it's like so silly. By the way, men and boys say all the things that they're good at all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not a big deal. And also, why is that an issue? And this whole idea that girls bragging or having an ego or being cocky, they're so scared of it. And it's that idea that we tell girls at a young age, don't be bossy, don't have an ego. But that's actually not a problem. Women having too big of an ego is actually not an epidemic. That's not an issue. Women are like so terrified of taking up too much space.
Yeah.
Whereas men having egos, that may be more of an issue because we've given them tons and tons of room to claim. But I know, let's do this. Like, let's model what it looks like to take up space, to own your talents, to say it out loud, and not be, tortured by the idea of like, is everyone out there thinking that I have an ego? Or like, that I bragged about myself too much?
Yeah. All right, let's do it. I'm going to close my eyes just because I feel like I'll do better. And then we'll just go like shot for shot. I'll go, you go, and we'll go back and forth for a second.
Oh my
just
goodness,
be like, the framework, I'm really good at blank. Okay, we'll do this. Ooh, this is going to be uncomfortable for me. Okay, let me think. And it's funny because it's like I almost want to preface the phrase with "I feel like I'm good at."
No,
but
I'm really good.
Oh, okay. I am really good at public speaking.
Yay! And it's funny because I keep wanting to affirm you. Yeah, you are.
Yep.
I'm good at dancing.
Let's see. I'm really good at dressing the way that I want to dress.
Oh, I love that. I'm really good at simplifying complex thoughts.
Ooh, I'm jealous. Nice. That's awesome. Let's see. I'm really good at letting myself stop reading a book when I don't want to read it. I used to really struggle with that.
I'm really good at managing my time and prioritizing a lot of things that need to get done.
I like that. That makes me think of, I'm really good at habit building.
I'm really good at academic topics.
I'm really good at writing.
I'm really good at caring for my friends and making them feel cared for.
I'm really good at gift giving. I love gift giving.
I'm really good at hosting a themed party.
Let me think. I'm really good at sensing if someone is actually fine when they say that they are. Like, I feel like I'm good at sensing of holding a space for them if I'm like, actually, I think maybe you want to discuss.
That's cool. I like that. That's a talent. That makes me think I'm really good at telling when someone is scared or feeling insecure.
All right, I'll do one more and then you do one more. Let me think. I'm trying to think of one where it's like I have a really hard time saying it. Let me think. I'm really good at podcasting. I'm not very good at saying that. I feel like I'm good at this.
You are good at it. You're really good at it. I am really good at laughing at myself and creating laughter with other people.
Good. Eyes open. I'm sweating. That was good. I like that.
I love the things you said.
Sweating.
And think about it too. The more you say it out loud, and I wish I could just affirm you, so that it sinks into your body and your heart and your mind and your soul, because the more you say that for yourself, the more you step into your power and you own it more. And then people feel that from you. They want to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hire her because she's showing that level of self-worth.
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's like you have to do that like in a career space too, where it's like we need to, I mean, I know so many women or women that have been on this podcast that have done incredible things and are like, yeah, like I mean, that's me. I'll be like, yeah, like I did a TED Talk. It's fine. And like, that's how I bring it up. And I'm like, what are you doing?
And didn't you feel like there was a moment while we were doing it where you wanted to be like, well, I should also say something I'm not so good at.
Yeah.
Just to balance the scales. Yeah. And I was like, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that.
Yep. All right. Well, I'll take us home here. So I like to... Before we kind of close up, is there anything, kind of last thing that you'd like to put out there? Like my audience is very much people of all genders, but, mainly 17 to 23, I would say the main ranges. Do you have any like last thoughts or like advice you'd want to give?
Yeah, I would say, I'm just thinking of it in the moment right now, which is just find the environments and the people where you feel like you can be most yourself and feel safe to be yourself, and just seek that out at all costs and live in that space and really tune in with like, this lights me up. I feel aligned in who I am, and do more of it so that it builds and grows.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good advice. And then at the end of my episodes, I like to do a quick few rapid fire questions that are just fun. First question is, what's the best thing you've bought that costs less than $100?
Oh my goodness. So I'm a real buy experiences, not things person. Yep. So I'm going to be left of center on this answer, which is I would say buying a dinner or a lunch with a friend.
I like that.
That to me is just, I just love that time that I have with them. It's so important to me.
Yeah. That's a good answer. I like that. I don't think I've gotten that one. I like that. Second one is, what piece of advice do you give others that you often have a tough time taking yourself?
Bringing it full circle right now, asking for help.
Yeah.
Here I went on a whole thing about, you girl, you need to ask for help. Everyone should. And then I totally still have a hard time. I've gotten so much better, but it's still so hard.
It's difficult, yeah. The third question is, what's something interesting you've recently learned, read, or had a discussion about?
Well, I just did actually, I meant to kind of bring it up more in our conversation about how people-pleasing is dishonesty, actually. You're not being honest with your own needs and truth. So people-pleasing is a form of dishonesty. And I ended up having this discussion around that inspired me recently, just this week.
Really interesting. I like that. Yeah, that's good. And then fourth question is, what is your fashion/clothing essential?
Well, it's a item of pink clothing, as we can see currently. But this whole book tour and this whole press, being on all the all the TV shows and everything, I have put a piece of pink attire on my body in some way or another, and it has brought me joy and has made me feel authentic, right? Like, it helped me feel like I didn't have to be a certain person that is on the news, and instead it's like it's me, Chelsey, that is, I happen to, like, pink makes me feel most myself, so I'm going to do that.
I like that. The pink clothes. Last question is, what's a song you've had on repeat lately?
There's a few. I'm going to go kind of old school, which is Black Eyed Peas, Where Is the Love?
Nice. That's a good song.
That song is so good.
So good.
I started listening to it a few months. It came on, and I was like, oh my God, this song is so wise. It is so, it's like the higher virtues of the, I mean, if you actually listen to the lyrics, it's so elevating.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good song. I haven't heard that song in a long time.
I know, so I started playing it more recently, like a lot. I was like, this makes
I used to Black Eyed Peas it on repeat. I forgot. Man, I gotta go back. Well, thank you so much for talking to me and, being present and open, and you just, you're amazing. I'm super pumped to see you've reached the end of the podcast. Not only because you hung out with me and our guests, but because you took the time to better your life through the stories and advice shared on this podcast. And if y'all would go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, that would seriously mean the world to me. And if something in the podcast really sparked an aha moment for you, please share it with those you love and get a conversation going, because I truly believe that that is where the magic happens. So keep learning, seizing the moment, and intentionally creating your life. Thanks for listening, and I hope to have you back soon.